Yeah, all right. Well, we're excited to have the famous Dr. Rob Orman with us. I'm not sure how we pulled that off, but thank you very much for joining us. And Joel, I don't know, how'd you get in contact with him in the first place? How'd this happen?
Well, initially this came up through my connection. We had Rich Levitan come over, and he was able to put me in touch with Rob. And then I reached out to Rob about some of his coaching work and some of the programs that he's put on, thinking that, our docs could really benefit from that. And that kind of exploded into a really cool conversation about, burnout, where is our specialty going from here, and kind of next steps. So that was where that connection started.
Yeah. And Rob, we just right before this meeting, we had one where we do a bi-weekly facility medical director meeting. We've got 14 medical directors. And so we get all, on Wednesday. And one of our guys was talking about, he went to a retirement party for one of our former program directors, Paul Blackburn. And he was talking to a bunch of his colleagues, and everybody was complaining about how much they're burnt out and how much they're sort of frustrated. And so he's like, you know what, you should come over and work with us. Like, we're not quite hating our lives like people we're struggling with. So this sounds like just an increasing issue. Like it was something that was visible back when I was young in my career, but I'm sure you probably have some data on just where this is going recently.
Yeah, like that. On the upward, not the downward. I don't know which way this is looking on your screen. I'm super curious. We're talking about burnout, and we can get into anything that you guys like. And Joel and I have spoken quite a bit about your system, and it seems to be that it is set up. Well, I don't think it seemed to be. It is set up so that it can nurture the careers and lives of clinicians, physicians. And I know that a lot of docs come to you because they're coming away from something else. That's like, whoa, I'm burnt, just as you were talking about at that retirement party. And I'm curious, what are the refrains that you hear that, on this, because we can talk about the personal level and the individual professional level, but it's that systems level where we might not have as much agency. So what are the refrains that you hear that there's this thing that is really just bringing me down in my shop. I'm getting tired. I can't recover. It's just too much. I can't continue to do good work, and I'm not going to last here. And I see that your group does the opposite. What are those things that the docs are telling you that they're not loving at their shops?
It's surprising, and I don't want to diminish, some of the work, but it's surprisingly simple. We can't change the EMR. I can't change the MIPS criteria. I can't change, the patient satisfaction metrics. One thing we do not do is we don't report, or we don't hold people accountable to a certain amount of RVUs per hour. Like if we're hiring you as a professional, we're assuming that you know how to do good work and you will pace yourself accordingly. We need to be responsible with our time and effort, but it's not that classic. Here's the whip. Get on the treadmill and run. The things that we can control, and I'll ask Joel to tell a story about something that he did just earlier this week. The things that we can't control is teaching our people to show gratitude to others. Like you would be amazed if you spend just 15 seconds a shift and you walk around and you say, you tell that nurse, hey, I really appreciate the way you handled that with this patient. That was just amazing. Like that takes seconds. But you do that just a few times and the effect on the shift is like, it's hard to understate. Like it sounds too simple, but it really, really has, an impact. And so Joel, we have something called the Hall of Fame. And the Hall of Fame is just the doc or the APP that just shows up and does a good job. They didn't, nothing heroic. It wasn't like they diagnosed something crazy and they did this miraculous thing, and it's just like you show up, you do your stuff, you're good attitude, good everything, you go home day in, day out. So Joel, you just presented that, right?
Yeah, so we do that quarterly. We do one to the doc, so one doc, one APP, and then one employee of the hospital. And we've had everybody from leaders in the nursing. This next round, we've got a housekeeper that was submitted. And so it can just be anything there. But it's interesting, we presented to 3 people this last round. One was a charge nurse, very seasoned ER nurse, been in the field for years. And she actually, and again, it's a pretty quick, here's a little certificate. We give them a little jacket, nothing major. She actually teared up during the whole thing. And then we went to the doc, and this is the third time I've heard this. The doc said, he particularly said, I've been in emergency medicine for over 40 years, and I've never been recognized like this. And which is, in a way, is really sad, because it's every day you show up with your altruistic, feelings, and you want to take care of people. And then it seems like the system's kind of built to beat that out of you to a certain degree. Nobody ever, puts on a graph how connected you are with your patients, or, how did you reduce suffering, or how has this affected you? It's all, your productivity numbers. And I really think we're doing a disservice when we do that, because I don't know of anybody that went to medical school to say, I want the fastest door to dispo time. That's why I'm going into medicine, So we have a few of these little programs where we try to recognize, again, they're pretty small, but the impact they have is exponential from the investment we put in.
I would love to share a story with you guys that just springboards off of that, because I'm taking so many notes here on what you're saying. It's all just phenomenal. I had a client come to me who was working in a system that was pretty good. It wasn't like, some of these CMGs have a real Machiavellian attitude, and then I have other clients who reach out to the central administrators and say, hey, I am just getting crushed here. And they look and say, well, you're seeing 2.45 patients per hour. You do not need any more support, and all that. It's kind of, whoa. It wasn't that. It was this client's challenge was that they love medicine, but that there was just kind of this dark cloud, and that nobody was grateful anymore. Everybody was entitled, and everybody thought they knew everything. It's like, I love medicine, but the practice of this, it's just all the other BS is just too much. Nobody thanks anybody for anything. Now, you guys are talking about proactively thanking, but this doc said, nobody's thanking me at all, ever. And when we were talking about mindset before this, and you have your ignition journal, which is phenomenal. I've never seen its equal in an EM group. And something like this is akin to what you guys are already doing. So here's a doc whose challenge is nobody is grateful. Well, think, where do I have agency there? When you are expressing gratitude, you have full agency. When you are upset that other people aren't grateful, well, you can't control the kind of day they had. You can't control the kind of person they are, or if they're going to say anything. There's only 2 things that you can do. And one is act in a way that's worthy of gratitude, which is going to mean different things to different people. But more importantly, and I learned this from my coaching mentor long ago, is be open to accepting gratitude when it happens. And that if you go into your day that I am going to be just fully sensitive to receiving this, a couple things happen. One is you now have a bit of a gamification of your shift. Rather than, Eric, you're talking about, you got to hit these RVU numbers. If you are standard deviation off the bell curve, you're out. No, it's like that's just being under the thumb. And that also just feeds into some of our worst imposterism attributes that, we need to be the A plus. If we're even in the middle of the bell curve, we're not enough. We need standard deviation. So get away from all that. So here is something that you do have some agency in how you act and how you receive. And if you are focusing on just receiving this thing, it turns a shift into a little bit of a game. So you have this focus and you have this intent for the day. And so I said, I don't want you to just be a little bit receptive to this thing. Now you guys you're not in New Mexico, but you know that radio telescope in New Mexico, but there's 50 receivers and they all move at once. It was in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Be like that. Be like that for gratitude and just see what happens. See what your experience is. Because when you think about, say you go out to a really nice restaurant. This it's not my original example. When I heard this, I was like, oh yeah, just chef's kiss. This made so much sense. You go out to a Michelin star restaurant and it's the best meal you ever had. And at those restaurants that the servers are doing this as their career. They're so invested in you and your experience and they care so much. They're professionals. And then you think, wow, what an experience. And you walk up to them and you say, hey, that was an amazing meal. And I so appreciate you. And they're just, yeah, I got it. I'm just finishing up my bills here. Versus, hang on one sec. Yes. Oh, wow, it was so incredible caring for you and your family. We hope you come back again. The experience is so different for you as the recipient of that, and it's also different for them as the giver. So just try this. And if you are documenting, you're working on your EMR, just pause, say, hang on one sec, I'll be right there. And then walk up to him and say, yes, what did you have to say? Thanks, Doc. Oh, you're so welcome. It was great caring for you and your family. Versus what do we usually do if we're working on our EMR, especially one of these suboptimal EMRs that, oh yes, I'm just stuck in this thing. I can't work on it.
Yeah. So, appreciate it. Bye. Yeah.
So, exactly. Yeah. Bye. So they came back a couple weeks later and they said, I can't believe it. Gratitude is everywhere. I didn't even hear it because you're walking out of a room and, you see somebody from the Titus Media and they say, thank you so much. It's 3 a.m. and you diagnosed it and it's great. And the family's so appreciative. They're so stressful. Thanks. You're welcome. Versus, yeah, you're welcome. I know it's so stressful to have this in the middle of the night. I'm glad that we could help. If it gets worse, come back in the morning. I'll just, that little step, Eric, you're talking about 15 seconds. So she came back and she said, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. I can't believe that my shifts could be like this. And then was doing it more and more. And every shift, that was their one focus. They knew the medicine. They knew, that wasn't the mystery. It was the receiving of gratitude. And then they started telling other people when they would hear gratitude regarding them. A patient say, that nurse was just amazing. Let me go get that nurse and bring them in here. Mm-hmm. And then they started this project in their ED where they started telling other docs about it. And so then other docs started having their days beat. And the culture of the department changed.
Right.
On that one little thing. And it was on your personal and your professional realm where you have full agency, take that and do that. That systems level is really hard. That's where you guys are excelling, is creating the system where that can really make a difference. Because if you're doing that in a system that is just squashing you down, you're going to feel pretty good, but you're still working in a system that is squashing you down.
Yeah. There's so much you're saying that triggers a lot of thoughts. I had we're trying to change a program in the ER where this is years ago. We were trying to get, we called it Doc First. We wanted the doc because we had a bunch of APPs, and the problem that we were running into is they would see the patient and then present, and inevitably it's like, well, I need an ultrasound. So now we're delaying the length of stay. So we flipped it, and we had the doc basically see people at the earliest point. We had a little sheet that's like, work up for gallbladder, make sure you get the ultrasound. That was it. And then you hand it over to the APP, and then you're in constant contact. Well, one of the nurses, she went by the name of T-Rex. Everybody knew her. The EMS knew her, everybody. And she was a great nurse, clinically very skilled, but just nurse crotchet, And and she fought us tooth and nail at every step. And I tried to get her fired. I talked to the CEO. I talked to the nursing director. Nothing going to happen. So finally, I switched one day, and she was in the room with me on a patient, and I said something that I could be honest with. I said, "Hey, glad you're here. We'll take good care of you. This is Nancy. She's your nurse. She is excellent at her nursing skills. And if I were laying on the bed and I saw Nancy standing over me, I would feel very comfortable that she's going to take great care of me." I skipped all the part about she's, sometimes socially a headache for me, blah, blah. I didn't say any of that. I said something that was sincere and that I actually believed. Yeah. And a day or two later, like, all the opposition evaporated. And there was still, it was not like a one and done, you still had to work on the relationship and build, but it made such a difference. And then you're talking about accepting gratitude. And that reminded me, Joel, you had your sort of burnout experience where your wife gave you some feedback.
Yeah. So I was going through a pretty good burnout phase, and I came home, and I'd go on these drives with my wife and kind of explain, decompress. I mean, that's, I think, one of the issues we have in the ERs. We don't really have anybody that we can talk to. We're not like firefighters where you've got a whole crew that you hang out with all the time. And I had this lady that came in at 3 a.m. and I was exhausted, and she was one of these ladies that had abdominal pain for years, and wanted me to fix it at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night or whatever. And so I kind of, I walked in, and I don't remember exactly what I said to the lady, but I'm sure I wasn't as polite as I could have been. But I was talking to my wife about it, and I said, I was like, well, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you think I can do at 3 a.m.? And she goes, well, you didn't actually see that, did you? And I said, well, no. And I said, but then I kind of got almost a little irritated. I was like, well, what would you have said? Like, if like, how would you have handled that? Because obviously what I'm doing is not working. And she said, I'd probably say something like, that's got to be tough going through this for so long. What's the best way I can help you tonight in the emergency room? And I thought, that's not bad, actually. So the next time I had a similar patient, which was probably the next shift or two shifts, that was, I used that line almost verbatim. Mm-hmm. Just like, man, it must be very difficult to be in chronic pain like this. What's the best way that you can, what's the best way I could help you tonight? And it was funny because the lady, she got really quiet, got a little emotional almost. And she said, I've never actually had a doctor listen to me before. This is already huge. And I thought, well, I didn't really do anything, but she requested some IV fluids and a little Phenergan, and nothing huge. But it was funny that how that much shifted her visit that night, but also the effect it had on me. Mm. And it was funny because when she was leaving, she was very grateful. But when you're mentioning this receiving gratitude, I'm actually noticing now, looking back, that I deflected that gratitude almost immediately, because she's like, oh, thank you so much. And she even gave me a hug. And I thought, I don't deserve any of this. I didn't do anything. And so, but I remember, I felt good, about our interaction. But it is interesting. I think in the ER, that's our default go-to is, I don't deserve any, even in situations, I've heard this, and I've said this myself, even in a situation where literally you've saved a life, the family comes to you and says, thank you so much. And my response has been in the past, well, any ER doc would have done the same thing. I'm not nothing special, Yeah. And they're trying to express actual gratitude. And what are we doing? We're like, no, I don't want to hear it. That's an interesting perspective that you brought up.
The biggest moment of their collective lives, and they're pouring all of that thanks into you, and you've got the cup on the side. It's like, just receive it. We want to give you this gift. I just want to tell you a story that just happened the other day. My birthday was a few days ago, and my mom called and she said, hey, I want to get you this gift. And she likes to get big gifts. I don't need anything. And she said, I'm going to call the local bike shop. And what is it that what's like a big thing? Nothing. I actually need nothing. I don't need anything. Just you calling is my gift. And she said, okay. And I hung up, and my wife said, what is wrong with you? Your mom actually just wanted to give you a gift. Just something small. So call her back and say, and I was like, okay, I'd like a bell for my bike. That's what I want. And so then she got me a bell, because to your point, Joel, she just wanted to pour this in. That feels so good to give it. And then when it's received, oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of the story that I've never shared this story before, but it was my mother-in-law. She got ill. She had cancer, and she was on chemo and all these things, and she was her immune system was way down. And at the time, I was working at a hospital with a cancer center attached, and so I was off that day, but I was unable to get there right at the time. And so she went in and saw one of my colleagues, who's a good friend and remains a great friend. And she ended up going into septic shock and all these different things, and really was pretty sick. And so, you can imagine your wife's there with your mother-in-law. They know that it's family relation, and so the doc's kind of buzzing around and all that kind of thing. And as they got her admitted up to the ICU, the nurses and the doctors kind of came in to update everything. And my wife kind of broke down, and she just was like, thank you guys so much for taking care of my mom. Mm-hmm. And I remember she said the reaction was so odd to her, because it almost kind of caught him off guard. She goes, I hope I didn't make him feel uncomfortable. Now she's worried that she maybe shouldn't have said thank you. But she said, yeah, it was weird. And it just occurred to me how rare that is, that you guys get appreciated for what you do. But, as you think about it, the appreciation is there, but it was almost like she said they kind of just didn't want to accept it. It was almost like, I'm just in the zone doing what I'm doing.
Why do we feel guilty? Why do we feel guilty to accept that?
It's strange. Yeah, it is strange. Like almost like we didn't earn it or something,
Maybe it's that massive imposter syndrome that hangs over a lot of our heads.
Yeah,
that's part of it. Yeah, sure. Hang on one second. I just gotta go get something as we're talking about this. Who knew this is where the combo was gonna go? All right. So, for your wife, do compliments matter to clinicians when we receive them? This is 20 years of cards. So everyone, say. And I think Eric is going to get his. We do not throw these away.
Yeah.
It's so meaningful when you get this. You're so used to, and I don't know if this happens in your system. There you go. My gosh, it's even the same size. Eric and I finished residency the same year. Phenomenal. Although I will say that occasionally I would get foodstuffs, mm-hmm. And I never knew if I should eat it. Usually I did. You know what I would do? I would get it during shift, and then I would just put it out for everybody else.
Yeah.
And then I would feel good about it. And so anyway, alas, let's now we kind of steered the conversation into this gratitudinal realm, which we can certainly continue on, but I want to allow space for whatever you guys wanted to chat about in this vibe.
Yeah. So I, kind of knowing peripherally, a little bit from your career, like I said, you're the famous, Rob Orman.
We are recording this. I want to get that little sound.
We're recording this one. And, so how did, you sort of, you imagine people like you and Mel, like these people that are on this pedestal, how could you possibly go through burnout? But obviously, you had your own walk through this, and then you have to figure out how do you adjust, how do you recover, and then you sort of, has like a second career in the coaching arena. So how did that occur for you?
we got to rewind. Eric, Eric, did you by chance, when we were senior residents, this might be a bit of a story, because if we can extend this podcast for a while, it'd be great, because this one might go on for a while. So did you go to ASAP San Diego when we were senior residents?
I did.
Okay, I was at that too. And I remember this, that was the year that they brought out the flavored charcoal, and I was super hungry one day. I just drank flavored charcoal. It was before they served cookies and all these things at ASAP. So that year they were doing a study, and it was an anonymous study. You may have filled it out too. And it was just, how do you feel about your job? How do you feel when you're driving into work? It was a burnout inventory, but it was before anybody was talking about burnout. It was allegedly confidential. And so, as you're just walking around, I think maybe I got a free pen from it, and so, well, of course, free swag. So I filled this thing out, and then a couple of months later, I got a letter from the authors who said, "We are really worried about you. We are really worried that you are either burning out right now or you are going to burn out. And there are, you might want to talk to somebody." It wasn't really any, how do you mitigate this? And so I'm thinking about that while I'm driving into Denver General, this powerful residency, pish posh. And then I get into the residency and I look at the waiting room like, oh my gosh, I hope there's not too many people here. I'm going to get crushed today. If only I had the self-awareness back then. So over the first, I'd say 10 years of my career, I had 3 major burnouts. And what was usually the catalyst for that was pace. I am a serial thinker. In a code, and this is, I think, true, I was probably one of the best in my group. Managing 10 people that came in at once, I was one of the worst. And it was holding on to those multiple tasks all the time. And if it wasn't too bad, if I was seeing 2 patients per hour, or maybe 2.1 or 2.2 average, I was okay. But when it started to get above that, it was really hard. And I worked in one of the busiest hospitals in the state. And so, and I took that job because I was, went from this chief resident and I got to take the best job. And this is the best job versus had I gone back and listened, what would be the best job for me? It would be someplace that was a little bit slower, where I could take my time. I could sit with patients. If I ran a code for an hour, I wouldn't come out to 15 new patients. Here's a couple things to do. So that kept happening. So the first time I was, I think, a second year attending, and I started applying to optho and anesthesia. How can I just, not be overwhelmed? And then my wife said, why don't you see if you can stick it out with emergency medicine, see if you can do it. Let's go to some conferences, let's level up. And I found that education and elevating the lives of clinicians was really my purpose. And so I started, there's a blessing and a curse here. So every time I burnt out, I would double down on purpose, on education and on elevation and on just teaching. I loved it. In fact, when I was in college, and still do, I thought, I may want to be a teacher, and not science, but high school, college, be a professor. Just love the process of teaching, learning, connecting in that way. So every time I burnt out, there were 3 major ones. There were lots of little ones. I would teach more, do more. This is how ERCAS was born, how I got Essentials Emergency Medicine and MRAP and all that came out of that. But what I was neglecting was the actual root cause of what was burning me out, which was pace, which was overwhelm. I loved connecting with patients. all of this a lot of the things that people think are BS, I actually liked. in, administrative BS. I'm like, oh, it's kind of interesting. I'll see if I can engage with that. So the pace. I wasn't addressing the core issues. So living a purpose-driven life is wonderful, but if you still have this pressure head pushing against you, well, it's still pushing against you, and it's going to wear down that rock, if, I'm using the metaphor of a river. And so eventually it was too much. And this is not sustainable anymore. I cannot have a career that's like this. And kind of had a moment of breaking down, just like, this is not going to work. I need to do something else. And so we ended up moving from Oregon to Colorado, and I worked in a rural ED. Well, it was a rural ED with a cath lab and a neurosurgeon. The best of all possible worlds. Can you imagine? With a cath lab and a neurosurgeon and all the orthopedics you could imagine. Now, granted, sometimes if you had ocular trauma, you had to send somebody 2 hours away. But the pace was slower. We all knew each other. It was I think there were 8 or 9 of us in the group. And it was the CMO was a real servant leader and would come down and say, how can I make your lives better? And I could then operate more in series. And I still would see a lot of patients during a shift, but it wasn't like I was drinking from the fire hose every day. I thought, this is now addressing the thing that I was trying to mitigate in my old job. And really what that is the process. If I could go back to my old selves, one reason why I do coaching is because I didn't have any guidance or mentorship or anyone who knew what to do to help me out then. Or maybe there was, but I didn't seek him out. And who knows if I would have, the egos, like I can manage all this stuff myself. And so if I went back in time and looked at what is going on in my job, and how do I compare that to my ideal job? My ideal job has all these attributes, a lot of the attribute that my current one has, but overwhelm. Overwhelm is the thing that keeps that Venn diagram from being completely overlapped. And it's kind of a deal killer for me. So what is within my control to address overwhelm? And going back, I would create systems and processes and triggers to do X, Y, improve my documentation efficiency. Like we're creating a course that's coming out this summer on documentation efficiency so you can get out on time. Because I would get out 4 hours after every shift finishing up my charts. And so I would look at that and say, how do I make overwhelm work for me? And at the end, has that moved the needle enough that I can thrive in this environment? Also, let's teach and live a purpose-driven life, have a purpose-driven career, but that is not going to be enough because that's not addressing the systemic issues that are pushing you underwater. I'm going to pause. That was kind of a long tail, but we'll send it back to you guys.
Yeah, you talk about wearing down the rock. For me, mine was it was a Starling curve. Like I would get busier and busier, and you kind of get in this, all right, move. But then once it crested and it got on the backside of that curve, and I'm like, there's too many balls in the air. Like and the stress of me not being able to have control or feel comfortable, like that's what would get me. Like, so like you said, it's that overwhelm. There's a point for me that I crossed that line. I'm like, this is going from I'm enjoying my shift to like, this is painful now. So trying to figure out how to accommodate that, in the unpredictable realm of emergency medicine. And you talk about charting with the advent of commercial level AI, where I don't need a data scientist and multiple PhDs and all this stuff, and we can use Anthropic or OpenAI. We've created a tool that is web-based, but we'll have an iOS and an Android app soon. But I walk in the room and I hit the record button and I talk to the patient just like I would normally, blah, blah, blah. And we can even talk about, March Madness or whatever, and it will ignore all of that. So you hit the record button, talk, and it builds the the text of the chart. And it'll even kind of put together, a list of a differential, to help you kind of think about stuff. And so now I don't have to spend extra time dictating later, repeating the same thing. And it usually does a pretty good job of capturing stuff that I probably wouldn't have put down just out of, hurry. So again, like trying to address, it's just so funny, the parallels and the similarities that I'm sure we all face and feel. And you mentioned something about gamifying your shift earlier. And that's been kind of in the back of my head as you've been talking. And one thing that we've tried to gamify with our teams is Google reviews. And there's a couple reasons. Number one is, that drives business because people actually look at Google reviews. Does this place stink or is it good? And then the way we're trying to coach the team is you just talk up, hey, the nurses, great team of nurses, they work really hard. One of the nice things that, administration can see is the, Google reviews, blah, blah. And we've got a little QR code that they can take a picture with their phone and write down, who was the nurse or whatever. And people getting named in a Google review, and we share it, like all the 5-star reviews, and we make sure what happened. Like, it changes the tenor. And again, it just goes back. It's not the Google review specifically, but it's that gratitude and that recognition of effort and participation. But it's
funny you mention those reviews when you look up almost all of your colleagues on like Doximity or whatever it is, 1 star, so rude versus, and then the next one, the best ever. And usually 2 reviews, one hate, one love, and that serves nobody. And this is doing this on a systemic level. And I'm just thinking this out loud. That well, curious. Do you select the patients if somebody's really mad? You give them the QR code. Is it, hey, do this when there's a good vibe?
There's probably not a big effort to send the QR code to people that are really angry, just as a natural bias. But I don't think. But it's hard to select just certain patients, right? Because if you're trying to systematize, then you have to remember, turn this on, turn this off. Yes to this patient, no to that patient, rather than just pass them out as much as you can. And I had an unfortunate experience. I was working with the health department, and you can look this up online and see me just get roasted. And so what happened was there was a E. coli 0157H7 outbreak, and a couple kids got really sick and they were in the ICU. And the person that had the restaurant was doing a great job. It was just an unfortunate problem, but his business was getting threatened. And I hadn't thought through the way my communication would come across. And I had the unfortunate thing of like, all right, I'm just to show people that it's safe. Like, you don't need to worry. We've done all the investigations. This is not a threat. I had a taco. I'm like, see, I'm eating one of their tacos. It's okay. The family that was involved with a sick child in the ICU viewed that as very callous, and very uncaring and minimizing what was happening to their child, which was, entirely frightening. Your kid's in renal failure in the ICU. That's, a terrible situation. The amount of hate mail and comments that I got from all across the country, right, was impressive. And you think, a 1-star review, you could shovel it, like, these people don't know me. They're not my close friends and family. They're not important, but it had a tremendous effect on me. Like, it was blistering, and hard to shake off. It was a terrible, terrible experience. So, like you said, getting these 1-star, this worst doctor ever, I'm sure you can, if it's a low-level thing, you can push it aside. But if you get hit pretty hard, it was a very unpleasant thing to go through.
Yeah, you were being canceled.
yeah. Before that was a term. Yes.
Before that was a thing. Yeah.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm kind of dying to look up that picture of the taco, but we're gonna hold off. We're gonna stick to.
I'm sure that things on the internet live forever, so you can. I'm sure you can find it.
Yeah.
Oh, that must have been. That must have been crushing.
It was. I mean, it was, and then it was crushing on kind of being on the recipient of all the negativity. But then it was also crushing realizing like I unintentionally hurt another family. Like, so fortunately, I was able to call and talk to the family directly, and they were very gracious, and so I appreciated that. But yeah, so it was terrible for them. It was terrible for me. Probably more terrible for them because they've got a kid that they're worried is going to die in the ICU. Obviously, that's a much more significant problem to be dealing with. But yeah, so positivity can help.
And Joel, I just kind of springboarding on what Eric's talking about. So just bringing back to mind the patient that you saw with the abdominal pain.
Mm-hmm.
And have you guys ever heard of verbal judo?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the term, yeah.
So verbal judo, it's a verbal de-escalation technique, and there's all sorts of things in the emergency department that you do de-escalate patients, but this was designed for police officers, but totally applicable to emergency medicine. But there's two core tenets of verbal judo that just came to mind after this. I was thinking back, and one is empathy absorbs tension. Empathy absorbs tension. So you have somebody who's really acting out, and code gray, 15 yoked security guards versus, hey, I know you're having a bad day. And sometimes people are just so escalated they need a ketamine takedown, but oftentimes it absorbs that tension. And then there's that tension in the room of that patient who has the expectation that they're going to get pushed back and they're going to be dismissed. And so here you are, empathetic, and or at least compassionate, with compassion being a half step back from empathy. You're not necessarily standing in her shoes, but you want her to be happy. You want her to be well and free of suffering. Empathy absorbs tension. And the second is when you sit down and you talk to someone that way, you're showing them so much respect. And there's this verbal judo line that says, we treat people as ladies and gentlemen, not because they are, but because we are. Now, it's not to say that that person is not a lovely human being, but in the emergency department, you're dealing with all comers, and not everyone acts as air quote, ladies and gentlemen, but we treat them as such because that is our perspective. And that is we're talking about gamification, and these are ways to have flow on shift. Is how do I have a specific focus on my day? And this aligns with what you guys are talking about, and how you are making sure that you bring compliments and that you acknowledge and that you validate. You're talking about validating, Joel. And another way to do that is I'm going to focus on every interaction I have, no matter who it's with, and see if that person can leave that interaction better than they were before. And we were talking about, you guys give out awards for, I can't remember what the award is, the Hall of Fame. Give out the Hall of Fame award. And you think that this applies to patients, and you have, let's say, you have the patient with borderline personality, and it's so difficult to deal with, and you have to set boundaries. How can I, without letting this get out of control, how can I have them leave here better than before? Okay, that's a patient. Housekeeping, you're talking about giving a housekeeper award. Nobody knows the names of any of the housekeepers. And they are just, unrecognized and silent, and just saying hi, say, hey, how's it going, Joe? Thank you so much for cleaning this room. And that ties all of them together. This is my focus for the day. And it's a place where you do have full agency, is doing these little things that take minimal effort. And I think that the three of us have talked around this today, not talked around this, but talked directly to this. It's fuel for you. It doesn't take extra effort. And then you end that shift less drained,
Yeah.
than you would otherwise, even though you're doing this extra thing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And that's one thing that I noticed is I started to, this is the way that I kind of came out of that burnout section in my career, was starting to extend some empathy, and then realizing that I was getting probably much more out of it than the patient was at the end of the shift. Like, I could go back to my workstation and be like, okay, maybe I didn't solve their abdominal pain mystery and figure everything out, but today or tonight, I did make a little difference. I did help a little bit. And in the ER, it's seldom that we fix everything, right? Even in a code situation, you get them back and get them over to the cath lab, or a stroke, you're like loading the TPA and getting them off for intervention. But we don't really kind of go top to bottom on too many things. So those little wins are where we can take that.
And there's a lot of little wins,
Yeah, a lot of little wins. And if you take a moment to say, I did do something that was helpful. And then, like, going back to what you said, if you take the time to actually accept appreciation and thanks, that's something I'm gonna work on my next few shifts, is actually actively doing that, because I find myself saying, oh, no, it's, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
Dr. Wilkie could have taken a lot better care of you than I did, and I just happened to be on shift.
Well, that goes without saying, of course, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, obviously. I have that on my scrubs, actually. Too bad I'm not Dr. Wilkie, but...
Hey, so just in case,
go ahead.
I just sent another continuation with a link so if Google kicks us off, we could jump right back on. Because one thing I wanted to make sure we cover is, so Rob, with your coaching, and not to give away your trade secrets and all the work that you do, but if
we give it away, anything you want.
Yeah.
That's the motto.
Yeah. So it's like, all right. I think there's so many people that are struggling with, a lot of this will resonate with them. It's like, all right. So if you, like you said, if you go back and talk to yourself and say, hey, I want to give you 2, 3, 4 things of practical, actionable advice that you can carry, because one of the problems that when Joel and I started looking at this is, you read, how do you overcome? It's like, well, make sure you find hobbies and make sure you meditate, and some of this it's all valid and true, but you can't you can't fall back on your hobby when you're on the shift and you're feeling that crushing weight. There's sort of the immediate deal with the issue, and then there's kind of long-term balance. So again, going back in time and talking to the young Dr. Orman, it's like, hey, I'm going to give you some tools that I want you can employ on a daily basis to just give you some shielding on all of this.
Okay, so I'm going back to Robbio in 1999, fresh attending. Is that? I want to make sure I've got the construct right. Okay, all right. So I'm just going to imagine that I'm coaching myself. I'm just going to play through this, and I'd sit down and first say, what's going on with your career? What's going well? What could be going better? And it would quickly come out, what are the stress points? I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm getting out of my shift so late, and it's getting old. And okay, all right, well, where do you want to start with that? What do you want to address? So here we are. So I'm talking to my old self, talking to my younger self, and it's, every day reliving the previous day of, this is stressful and this is not sustainable. I think I would say that out loud. This is not sustainable. So what are the things that are going on? How would you like your life to be different in a year? What out of this do you want to be different? And so there's the goals. So we've established the goals of coaching. I would like to not feel overwhelmed. I would like to not be getting out 4 hours after. Well, let's take that as a positive. How long do you want to stay after? I want to get out a maximum of 1 hour after the end of my shift. Okay. Now we have something tangible. So we would have basically a laundry list of all of these things that are stressful or that are non-aligned with what's the ideal job. And the ideal job is one where I didn't feel constantly overwhelmed and wasn't getting out late. So we take one of those problems. It's, if we take all 5 at once, it's, like going to a buffet and think, oh, it all looks so good, I'll just eat it all. You can't do that. You got to start one at a time. So we would look at one of those things, which fortunately are both the same thing, and then start breaking it down into smaller steps. So let's say it's getting out late. Well, what's happening there? It has to do with delayed decisions, deferring decisions, kicking the can down the road and not deciding when you can decide, especially you have a full shift guest and they start and end the whole shift with you, and you think, oh yeah, actually I could have decided, but there was just so much kind of discomfort and angst about making that decision. I'll just defer it. And then documentation, not documenting in real time. Eric, when you're talking about that ambient AI that creates the chart, right? What we know that didn't exist back then. Back then, we were dictating our charts into the phone. Mm-hmm. Now with the EMR, the flow is a little bit different. So let's say it's EMR, and think, all right, how do I address this? And so we start breaking that down further. How do we get this guy documenting in real time so that at the end of his shift, he doesn't have just a stack of charts? Because we know at the end of the shift, you're just exhausted. And that chart that could have taken 4 or 5 minutes in real time now takes 10 or 12 minutes because it's just, let me surf the internet. Let me go walk around. Let me go talk to some people, and my brain's fried.
Yep.
So let's talk about front loading versus back loading your documentation. And then let's break that down even further to the point when that can happen. And that is, let's get a history and physical. And this would be asking questions about flow and where the processes are, but I'm just talking about me, how I would do it. Let's get a history and physical down on every patient in real time. And you can dictate that, or you can put that on the EMR. How do we do that? Well, after every patient, before I see the next, unless there's something critical to do, I will get the H&P done. Sounds easy, but it's really hard, because then you get to the real issue. You get to the habits we learned in residency, which are to backload our charts, to finish them at the end of the shift, because we kind of would fetishize staying late and then, taking one for the team. What happens in real time? There's a habit of not doing that. But then there's also, in real time, you get out of that room and you see, there's new patients on the tracking board. There's stuff to do. I need to go do that instead of this thing right here to document. Why do you need to do that? Because those patients need to be seen. They can't wait. Why can't they wait? Well, maybe they can. And then we get into something deeper. We get into, what's the fear? Is it fear of failure? Well, unless it's a chest pain patient who you're not going to make wait, or something, or a critical patient. Or is it fear of judgment? And people are going to judge you and think you're not up to snuff and you're not the fastest doc. Then we get into, what's the inner voice that is telling you to not dictate right now? And you're going to feel that gravitational pull to not get that chart done in real time. So here we've taken this whole thing of getting out late to bringing it down to, how do you document in real time? Well, what's the habit that you've had that keeps you from doing that? Then what's your inner dialogue that's going to pull you away? And now, how can we build new habits? How can we set things up so that that inner dialogue that's going to come up is going to be acknowledged? And then how do we account for that and make sure that we have baked into your process documenting in real time, getting history and physical in real time? And then there's going to be caveats to that. What happens in mid-shift overwhelm? The first 2 hours of a shift, it's just, hey, it's party time. I'm just intake. Mm-hmm. New patients, I got no dispos, I got no phone calls. It's just C. I just saw 14 patients. Isn't that amazing? And then everything starts coming back. everything starts coming back, all those labs, and then there's new patients, and there's ambulances, and you get transfers, and you get consult calls, and you're overwhelmed. And that whole thing about, now I really can't document. Yes, you can, but how do I fit that in to all of this other stuff? Because this was, and both of you guys talked about this, is, do things for the patient. Do everything for the patient. Don't do anything for ourselves. There are things we can do for ourselves, and documentation in real time is the procedure that we do for ourselves, because then we're not backloaded, and then we're not staying late. Do it in real time so that we can walk out that shift unencumbered and walk out that shift on time. So and that same process can be used for any of the stress points. There are some docs who feel the opposite. It's like, oh, volume's great, but I get into the resus bay and I just feel the imposter come on. Mm-hmm. And I get so stressed and I don't want to go to work because I know it's going to happen. It's predictable. There's going to be a sick patient. Okay, well, let's work on that. Let's work on what's happening in the resus bay with your mindset, with your actions, with your communication, and make a structure out of it. Because we think that we can just do force of will and push our way through it. But it's breaking it down into small steps, building new habits, building new mindsets, but also acknowledging that old stuff, the old thoughts and the old imposterism, if it's there, or the inner criticism, is always going to bubble up. It's still going to be there. Okay, how do I accept that and move on in a more productive way? So there is, that wasn't the most structured way, but I was thinking, if I was talking to my old self, how would I advise him? And so there you go. There's advising young Robbio, just a child in short pants playing on the playground.
Yeah. That's funny that you put it that way, because I think that most docs don't even think about what are their pressure points. They just, all they know is that they go into a shift, it's overwhelming, they're in survival, mode. And then, you talking about this documentation. I remember I worked at a hospital that was one of these that you'd come in, you put your bag down, and you were already 8 patients behind, and the nurses are shoving EKGs and, hey, doc, look at doc, we got a guy that's sick and nobody's seen him yet. And you're like, oh my gosh. And I remember that shift, those were only 8-hour shifts. And I remember after the clock would tick on that 8th hour and it would end, I would have this relief, like, okay, now this is my time. Nobody's paying me. I could finally catch up on my stuff. But what's interesting is when you mentioned that, I never realized it before. I was putting off all of the documentation, all of those things till the very end, to where it was like, now it was my time, because I was staying late. And I was there most times, 2-3 hours after a shift. And most of the doctors were, because you were just kind of spinning the whole time. But there were a couple docs that were interesting. They tended to be the docs that had the longevity, in their 60s, a lot of them, and still seemed to enjoy it. But for some crazy reason, those dudes could get out 20, 30 minutes after their shift. And I never could understand how they did it. But it was a lot of this stuff of taking the time during the shift to do their, duties that they needed to do, and not just pushing it off.
Yeah. Yeah. I worked at a place where it was a badge of honor that you sign up for the patient in Epic, but while they're still in the waiting room. They haven't even come back yet, and then everybody would do documentation at the end of the shift, and they're all staying late. And I'm like, at my age and I'm like, I'm going to document real time. I'm not going to play that game anymore.
Yeah.
But and it was grabbing, and again, it was very metrics driven. So it's grabbing, signing up while they're still in the waiting room, so your numbers look good. And I'm just like, breaking a lot of these traditions can be tricky and hard.
We have a course that called Flame Proof. It's this 6-month anti-burnout course, and
that's a great name.
Oh,
Flame Proof.
Right.
Yeah, in fact,
Right.
that's what got me really interested in talking to you in the first place. When I was looking this up online, I thought, man, this really kind of dovetails with a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. And so I was like, oh, that's really great because there's not a lot out there, especially specifically for ER.
Yeah.
They're just kind of like, when you get these burnout books, I mean, I've read 3 of them, and they're like, here's the list of 10 new things you got to do to be relaxed. Okay, you got yoga, you got to exercise, get to, you're like, dude, I already can't handle my life. Like, you're giving me 10 more things to do? Like, I haven't seen my kids for 4 days. Like, come on.
Yeah. So, yeah, right. That's why we made the things. If there's nothing out here, we gotta do the thing. We're seeing the same things come up over and over. But to Eric's point, it's just bringing back this memory. So, in one of our recent cohorts, we had, we were obviously talk about a lot of this stuff and how to operationalize it. We had a doc who was much like you, Eric. He graduated at a similar time we did, and he documented in real time, and he got out on time. And all of the other docs in his group didn't. And so we sent him on a mission to see if he could improve the lives of his docs and show them how he did it. And there was such pushback from leadership that we can't document in real time. We're gonna make patients wait. We got this, we got to backload the shit. And it was just this, it had become this cultural habit. Mm-hmm. And this mindset of, first off, patients can't wait. We all know that, in fact, they can. They can wait those 4 minutes for you to chart. Those 4 minutes are going to happen somewhere. And however that has to happen, Joel, you're talking about that. This backloading of, you're talking about shift endurance of how do I maintain my energy and my sanity? And so there you have older docs who, the reason you get to be an older doc is you got 2 things. You know how to pace yourself, is what they're doing, and you have continuous curiosity about the job. Every doc I'm looking at your books, and we were talking about books we're reading. Every doc who gets to that point maintains curiosity. If it's just punching the clock, especially with emergency medicine, is a nearly impossible job to do, because it's so demanding. Mm-hmm. But that almost institutionalization of not only accepting backloading, but promoting that is galvanized in many emergency departments. Mm-hmm. And to think, I'm gonna actually do my charts in real time, and I'm gonna finish at the time that I'm actually scheduled to finish. If you said that to most people in industry, they say, yes, of course, you do your work during your work hours. Yet doctors have this idea of, I'll go home and I'll work on my charts. And then I'll wake up at 7 a.m. and do my charts. And it is this, it's almost like we need to start a counterculture movement.
Right.
Right. Get out on time and don't stay late.
Well, and on top of that, we've, I don't hold my breath that CMS or the government will come in and make my life easier. However,
well played.
However, there was with the new 2023 rules for CMS documentation, they actually made our lives easier. Right? Review systems is gone. There's no proscribed number of physical exam items you must document. Like, it's all medical decision making. It's thinking in ink, and like you said, if you can do it contemporarily with the flow, like the burden of documentation, the little check boxes that you have to do now compared to what we did prior, your notes can be significantly shorter and cleaner. So, but breaking that habit, like, we've been doing this since 1995. So
yeah.
Do you feel that urge? Complete review systems, otherwise negative. I could not say it.
I know that it's not going to count towards anything, and it doesn't have to be there, but it just feels like ethically wrong. Like I'm going against some religious mindset to not put it. I'm like, even though I think for the last 10 years, I like would be shocked if I heard a doc actually go through all of the reviews.
Well, or how about this? You've got a patient with right lower quadrant abdominal pain.
Yeah.
And the only physical exam you document is the abdominal exam.
What about the cranial nerves, 2 through 12?
Right.
Yeah. What about their DTRs, Eric? What about their DTRs?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it was. It almost when that came out, it almost felt like a trap. You know,
It's a trick.
It's a trick. It's a trick.
Like they're gonna say, we knew you weren't doing the reviews.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So, Rob, I would talk a long time, and but I'll try and put some bookends on this. So if people are like, all right, I like what he's talking about, and so I've got an executive coach, and the amazing thing about the executive coach is it's not necessarily new information, but it's the dialogue and the accountability that actually makes me move the needle, and I get a lot more done with that relationship. So it's definitely worth my money to pay. And so if somebody's like, all right, I hear what Rob's saying, I've got to get control of my life. Like, how do they interface with you? Like, how do they get help from you to get this rebalanced?
Well, there's a couple ways. I mean, if you want to reach out to me, I'm at roborman.com, all one word, ROBORMAN.com. And that's where all my stuff is, and you can find it there. But I have a podcast that talks about these things and tries to break down the particular pain points that are unique to emergency medicine and acute care physicians. And to start there, we also have courses. We've got Flame Proof, which is I was talking about the 6-month anti-burnout course. We're in our second cohort of that right now. We're starting a new course, Out on Time.
Cool.
I just realized I said that like 50 times, and if I was better at marketing, I would have bookended it. And
trademark, yeah.
Trademark, hashtag, whatever. And that's all at guidewirecoaching.com. So I have a coaching partner, Scott Weingart, and we create these courses together. And Guidewire, that's the name of our.
Yeah, Scott Weingart, another no-name person. Just
Yeah, who is that? Right.
It's funny.
Never heard of him.
What a great name. I mean, that's great. I love that.
That took us 6 months to figure out. We would call each other back and forth. What about this note, this note, this note? And then one night, I don't remember which one it was. It was 3 a.m. or something. Guidewire. Yes.
Guidewire. That's exactly what we need. I love it. That's a great name.
When we've been friends for so long, and I would call him on these critical care cases, and so sometimes you're hoping for it, you're doing the right thing. Almost always it was no. You're doing the wrong thing. You're doing it all wrong, baby. But yes, yeah. So he is. We put those courses on because we found that in our one-on-one clients, he has one-on-one clients as well, and is that the same things keep coming up. Docs are getting home late. Docs are feeling overwhelmed. Docs are feeling they don't have agency. There's imposterism. There's inner criticism. Oh, let's just make a course. And we're talking about all this individual stuff. And so, yeah, that's how they get a hold of me. But being intentional about community is critical. And a time when it is most palpable, and I would imagine you guys see this, is when you come out of residency. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure where this is coming up because you're just asking me how people get a hold of me, but I feel like I need to put an exclamation point on this. So you come out of residency, and when we're in training, we have this built-in community and this built-in support, and there's this esprit de corps, and we're all in this together, and it's amazing, our residency mates. And my wife, we were co-chief residents. I mean, come on, you build these great connections. And you get out, and then it's just nothing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nothing. And it takes effort, it takes intention, and it takes focus to say, I want to maintain and build community, because you don't have that same support when you get out. And we're talking a lot about these individual skills, but having a supportive community is equally, if not more important. And I'm not talking about a community just for, are we allowed to swear on this?
Sure.
Maybe it's not just for bitching sessions, although sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need to unload, but you don't want to co-ruminate. It's just, hey, I've got your back. You've got my ear.
Yeah.
Community.
I talked to some residency buddies, the exact thing you're just talking about, and we coined the term post-residency depression. Like, you got out and you're just like, huh, like it's different. And it took me, it took me 4 or 5 years to kind of not drive into work thinking they're going to take my medical license away any day now, you know? So.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting because, you know, with our group, one of the main thrusts that we've had is, you know, how do we take those that are struggling at other hospitals, how do we recruit talent essentially? And one of the ways that we've done that is to say, okay, what can we do to make our doc and our providers' lives better?
Yeah.
What length of shifts can we do? How do we get them out on time? How do they feel supported? And it's funny that as we've really put emphasis into that, we've kind of got this flow of these docs that are burning out at other locations, or maybe not burning out, but maybe just struggling with that load, and they're recruiting their own good docs. They're like, oh, you got to come work over here. A lot of them come over part-time, and then they start seeing it, and then they start pulling in friends. And so that's kind of where we put our emphasis. That's where our you know, burnout empathy work is kind of led us, is we almost use that as our recruitment arm.
The thing that one of the most amazing motivators that I've had over the last couple of years doing this, that, you know, gets you up out of bed excited, is like we've got quite a few emails from different providers that said, "You've saved my career." Like, you're like, holy cow! Like, you know, that's, you feel immensely grateful and excited, but at the same time, you're like, well, that's, you know, there's so many people that are just getting crushed by the specialty.
And as we wrap up, I know we all got to run here. I just want to reflect that back on you, what you just said, and that I think it's so easy nowadays for physicians to feel like they're disposable.
Mm-hmm.
But think about all that you went through, all that we went through, and all this experience, and just the type of human being that you've become. That physicians are so valuable, and you are treating them as if they are valuable. How do we support you? How do we maintain your value as a human being? And we respect you. And when you feel valued, and that's, you know, right. You know, I think that maybe that's what they're saying. You had me at hello.
Yeah.
All right. So let's wrap it up. It has been amazing chatting with you guys. Super fun. I feel like this could be a 17-hour podcast that we can do here.
I know everybody's gonna have to watch it like 2.5 times speed. You know.
Yes, exactly, or 8 times if they can get it.
Well, thank you so much, Rob, for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, and also your work in our field is really needed, and we really appreciate all you do.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Here we go. So as we're talking, that gratitude is received with a full open heart. I don't know, too awkward? How do I say it?
There you go.
You know what, Joel, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. My mission is to elevate the lives of physicians, and that reflection back is really appreciated.
That's awesome. So, Rob, I'll send you an email after this with some stuff, and you know, love to continue the conversation over the next years. This is amazing stuff.
I have so much to learn from you guys as well. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, again, I'll echo Joel's thing. Thank you so much for taking the time, and tell your wife thank you for letting us steal you away for a little bit.
I will tell her that. All right. Thank you guys. Take care.
All right. Thanks.